Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a unique deep dive into the very latest news updates from across the Caribbean. Our mission is basically to unpack these critical developments, pull out the important bits of knowledge and insight, help you understand what they mean for the wider Caribbean community. These are all really fresh reports, the most recent coming to us just today, July 4, 2025.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here is how these seemingly separate stories of weather, policy shifts, economic stuff, they actually weave together. They paint a pretty comprehensive picture of the region's current challenges, but also the advancements. It gives us a real pulse check.
Absolutely. Okay, let's unpack this and dive right into the Caribbean's latest. We're starting with the regional weather outlook. Always crucial, this daily update for everyone in the Caribbean. What's the forecast looking like for today, July 4th?
Right, so from news items curated by the DGH News and Information Network, we're seeing a pretty typical midsummer pattern influencing conditions. There's a dominant Bermuda-Azores high-pressure system. Now, what that means for you is generally fair and warm weather, particularly in the northern and eastern Caribbean. This system tends to steer tropical moisture away.
Fair and warm. So, what should our listeners actually expect when they step outside? Is it looking like a perfect beach day, or maybe keep an umbrella handy just in case?
Well, expect a mix of sun and clouds.
Oh.
Daytime highs should be comfortably ranging from about 30 to 33 degrees Celsius. That's roughly 86 to 91 Fahrenheit. However, there is some moisture around. It's from a weak tropical wave that's forecast to move across the Lesser Antilles this afternoon. Think of a tropical wave like a ripple in the atmosphere. It can bring increased moisture. So this means there's an increased chance of scattered showers, maybe some isolated thunderstorms, mainly popping up in the afternoons. If you're anywhere from Trinidad and Tobago north to the Leeward Islands, definitely watch out for brief, heavy downpours. They could lead to some localized street flooding. So yeah, probably keep that umbrella close.
Okay. And what about the larger islands, the Greater Antilles, places like Jamaica, Cuba?
In the Greater Antilles, Jamaica, Hispaniola, Cuba included, conditions look slightly more stable. Now, afternoon sea breezes might still trigger a few isolated inland showers, but overall, it's looking clearer there. Marine conditions, generally slight to moderate, waves about 1 to 2 meters. So pretty pleasant conditions for most activities out on the water. If you're planning a boat trip or a swim, it looks like a good day for it.
What's particularly interesting, though, is that forecasters aren't currently tracking any organized tropical cyclone development in the Atlantic basin. Is this quiet period a welcome break, allowing for better preparation? Or is there maybe a risk of folks becoming a bit complacent as we head towards the peak hurricane months?
That's a really critical question. Look, while a quiet period is certainly welcome, the real insight here is the need for sustained preparedness. Understanding the daily weather pattern is vital, not just for your comfort, but for sectors like agriculture, tourism, and definitely for public safety. Conditions can change really fast during hurricane season. So continuing to monitor forecasts, keeping those emergency kits updated, that should stay top priority regardless of how calm it seems right now.
Right, good advice. Okay, moving from the skies down to the soil. Barbados is making some significant strides in agricultural technology. How is this strategic push impacting food security? That's always a big topic for island nations.
Yeah, it is. So from recent news items, Barbados is really intensifying its efforts to integrate modern tech into its farming sector. And this isn't just about, growing more food. It's a strategic move to really bolster the nation's food security and also reduce its heavy reliance on imported goods, which, as we know, can be vulnerable to global supply chain issues. Officials are actively promoting agri-tech. That includes things like hydroponics, growing crops in water, no soil leaking, and vertical farming, which is growing food in stacked layers to save space, plus precision agriculture using drones, sensors, basically doing more with less.
Okay, so what does this actually mean for a small island nation like Barbados? They face, built-in limits like land scarcity, water shortages. Are they really finding ways around those constraints?
Absolutely. This initiative directly tackles those physical limitations. It enables more efficient, higher-yield food production, even when space and water are tight. By using methods like hydroponics, for instance, they can grow food with way less water and in a much smaller area. And crucially, there are financial incentives grants, low-interest loans being offered to farmers and entrepreneurs willing to invest in these new technologies. The goal is a real, tangible increase in both the quantity and quality of locally grown food. It's about making the island more self-sufficient, more resilient. It's a proactive approach to food sovereignty.
But who really benefits here? I mean, will the small-scale traditional farmers be able to afford this transition, or is it mostly going to help the larger agricultural companies? And what about training and support? What's needed to make sure this technological leap is, sustainable and works for everybody in the sector?
Well, that's the key question for implementation, isn't it? But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this strategic embrace of technology, it could offer a really compelling model for other small island developing states facing similar challenges. The real insight here, I think, is how Barbados is showing that building resilience against climate change and global supply chain problems isn't just about adapting, it's about innovating. But it's long-term success.
Yeah.
That's definitely going to depend heavily on inclusive implementation, making sure the benefits and the necessary education reach all levels of the farming community.
Okay, let's turn now to pretty contentious theme that seems to be dominating domestic policy across the Caribbean: public sector salary negotiations. Feels like we hear about this a lot from different capitals.
Indeed. According to recent news items, in several nations, Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, are examples, unions representing civil servants, teachers, healthcare workers. They're locked in these protracted discussions with their governments. They're demanding wage increases that actually reflect the rising cost of living. It's putting immense pressure on household budgets, as you can imagine.
Can you give us some specifics? What's making these negotiations so challenging on the ground right now?
Sure. In Trinidad and Tobago, for instance, unions have flat-out rejected initial offers. They argue they're just not enough to counteract years of high inflation that has seriously eroded their purchasing power. So they're pushing for retroactive payments, basically, back pay for past periods, and also more substantial long-term increases going forward. Similarly, in Jamaica, the government is facing significant fiscal constraints, partly from existing debt, partly the economic fallout from the pandemic. These economic realities are being pitted against what are, frankly, legitimate demands from public employees. It creates a very tense, very difficult negotiation environment.
Yeah, it really highlights a critical dilemma for governments, doesn't it? How do you adequately compensate your essential workforce, make sure they can maintain a decent standard of living without, jeopardizing the country's overall fiscal health? And there's another angle, too. Does consistently undervaluing public sector workers risk a brain drain, losing essential talent to other countries, which could ultimately cost the nation even more in the long run?
Absolutely. These negotiations are way more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're a critical test of a government's ability to balance financial prudence with actually valuing its human capital. The outcome directly impacts thousands of public workers. And crucially, it affects the quality and stability of essential public services, healthcare, education, administration, everything. And that brain drain risk, it's very real across the Caribbean. If public sector pay lags too far behind private sector international opportunities, nations risk losing the very expertise they need to drive development.
Speaking of vital public services, Trinidad and Tobago's Water and Sewerage Authority, WASA, it's under intense public and political scrutiny again. Seems like a perennial issue causing widespread frustration.
That's right. News reports are indicating continued concerns about WASA's, persistent inability to provide a reliable water supply to all communities. And this is despite significant government funding over the years. Opposition figures, citizen groups, they're now calling for a comprehensive audit of the authority's finances, a thorough review of its management practices. They're citing long-standing issues, aging infrastructure, frequent pipeline ruptures, and questions surrounding procurement processes. It's a really complex, multi-layered problem.
And it sounds like the scrutiny goes beyond just operational efficiency. It's delving deep into the entity's leadership and governance, too.
Precisely. The debate has been further fueled by some recent management decisions. They've drawn sharp criticism for appearing, politically motivated rather than based on merit and actual expertise. This has led to widespread calls for a more independent, more technically qualified leadership structure at the state-owned utility. At its core, I think this is really a crisis of public trust. Citizens feel that their basic right to a consistent, safe water supply just isn't being met, despite the nation's resources.
So how can WASA truly be reformed to operate more like an efficient, modern utility rather than, this bureaucratic monolith? And what level of political will is actually required to implement the deep structural changes needed? Changes that guarantee every citizen that basic right to consistent, safe water. These seem like fundamental questions for any nation, especially an island.
The efficient and equitable management of a nation's water supply is absolutely fundamental.
Yeah.
It underpins public health, economic stability, everything. The ongoing issues at WASA directly affect hundreds of thousands of citizens every single day. The key insight here, I believe, is that while investment in infrastructure is obviously vital, what's equally critical is a real commitment to transparent governance. And prioritizing technical expertise over political appointments, that's essential to rebuild public trust and ensure long-term reliability.
Okay. On a different note of national development, Guyana. They're making significant moves towards establishing a new deepwater port. What's driving this massive infrastructure project, and how might it reshape Guyana's role in the region?
Right, so as Guyana's economy continues its really rapid expansion, fueled significantly by the oil and gas sector, the government is actively exploring this deepwater port development. That's according to recent news. This critical piece of infrastructure is seen as essential to handle the increasing volume of imports and exports, yes, but also to truly position Guyana as a major logistics and shipping hub for the whole South American continent. It's a very strategic play for regional economic leadership.
What are the anticipated benefits of such a massive undertaking? And conversely, what are some of the critical challenges they'll need to navigate? It sounds like a truly transformative project for the country.
Well, a modern deepwater facility would allow much larger vessels to dock. That would significantly cut shipping costs and drastically improve trade efficiency. This would, of course, directly support the booming offshore oil and gas industry, but it would also provide a huge boost to agriculture and manufacturing sectors. However, a project this large inevitably brings big questions. What's the environmental impact going to be on the coastal ecosystems? And what robust measures will be put in place to mitigate it? Furthermore, how will the government ensure that the development primarily benefits Guyanese businesses and workers, rather than disproportionately serving foreign interests? It's a really delicate balance, maximizing economic gain while ensuring equitable national benefit.
Yeah, this project could indeed be a profound game changer for Guyana's economic future, really establishing it as a crucial gateway to global trade for South America. Let's pivot now. A significant historical note for Jamaica hitting a major anniversary today, July 4, 2025. A moment that fundamentally reshaped the nation's labor landscape.
Yes, exactly. On this day, July 4, 1975, a landmark piece of legislation took effect in Jamaica, the National Minimum Wage Act. This was championed by the government of Prime Minister Michael Manley. And for the very first time, it established a basic wage floor for all Jamaican workers. That's detailed in reports from that period.
What was the core purpose of the act back then, and how was it received by different parts of Jamaican society at the time?
It was really a cornerstone of Manley's democratic socialist agenda, aimed at creating a more equitable society, protecting the most vulnerable in the workforce from, well, exploitation. Before this, wages were basically determined solely by individual employers or through collective bargaining, which often left many unprotected and underpaid. Now, while some business interests argued it would stifle economic growth, maybe lead to job losses, the government pushed forward. They viewed it as a moral and social imperative, ensuring a basic standard of living for everyone. It was really a defining moment in the nation's social contract.
Looking back now, 5 decades later, how has the national minimum wage evolved? And does it still serve its original purpose? I mean, providing a livable income in the face of modern inflation, economic challenges. It's a debate we see globally, isn't it?
It really is. That act was a pivotal moment in Caribbean labor history. It set a precedent for social legislation, affirmed the government's role in protecting workers' rights, and that legacy continues to fuel contemporary debates about labor rights, economic justice, right across Jamaica and the wider Caribbean. The ongoing challenge, of course, lies in dynamically adjusting the minimum wage, trying to keep pace with the cost of living while also considering its broader impact on employment rates and national economic competitiveness. It's a continuous balancing act.
Right. Okay, from historical shifts to contemporary political aspirations. The British Virgin Islands, they're continuing their push for greater autonomy. This sounds like a complex path towards increased self-governance.
It is. From recent news items, the government of the British Virgin Islands is continuing this delicate but determined push for greater self-governance. And they're doing this even as they simultaneously implement these wide-ranging reforms recommended in the Commission of Inquiry report. Premier Natalia Wheatley has emphasized that the goal is to build a more transparent, accountable, and robust system of local governance. This is seen as a necessary step to eventually achieve a new, more autonomous constitutional relationship with the UK. It's a very intricate dance, as you say.
So it's truly a balancing act, then, demonstrating serious reform while at the same time asserting a clear vision for self-determination.
Precisely. The BVI has to convincingly demonstrate to its own people and to the UK that it's serious about reform, putting in place strong institutions, strong mechanisms to prevent past governance failures. Simultaneously, they're asserting their political aspirations for more autonomy. The deeper insight here, I think, is that this journey isn't just about changing laws on paper. It's really about fostering a whole new political culture, one that supports robust, independent self-governance.
But are the reforms being implemented, deeply and sincerely enough to satisfy London, to prevent future oversight? And maybe just as crucially, does the general populace of the Virgin Islands actually share a unified vision for what greater autonomy should look like in practice? These internal and external factors will undoubtedly shape the path forward.
Absolutely. This is a truly pivotal moment for the British Virgin Islands. The outcome won't just define its political future, but also its ability to govern itself effectively for generations to come. Success is going to require both meticulous administrative work on the reforms and the cultivation of broad public consensus on the specific path they want to take towards greater autonomy.
Okay, finally, let's look at the cutting edge of finance in the Eastern Caribbean, digital currency. A really forward-thinking initiative with potentially global implications.
Yeah, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, the ECCB, they continue to lead the charge in adopting central bank digital currency CBDC with their DCash initiative. That's according to recent reports. The platform is now operational in most of the member countries of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, the ECCU. It offers a secure digital alternative to physical cash. This really puts the ECCU right at the forefront globally in this space.
So what are the key goals here? The anticipated benefits of this pioneering effort, and what challenges still remain in getting it broadly adopted across the region?
Well, the goal of DCash is multifaceted. It aims to increase financial inclusion, making services accessible to more people. Also, improve the efficiency of payments, making transactions faster, cheaper, and, crucially, provide greater resilience in the financial system. That's particularly important, say, after natural disasters that can disrupt traditional banking. Now, adoption is still in its early stages, but the ECCB is running public awareness campaigns. However, significant challenges definitely remain. Things like ensuring robust cybersecurity to protect user data, overcoming some initial public skepticism about digital money, and making sure the system is really user-friendly for everyone, including those who aren't, super tech-savvy.
Is this truly the future of money in the Caribbean, then? And what valuable lessons can be learned from the ECCU's experience as other nations, really all around the world, start contemplating their own digital currency futures? It seems like a bold and pioneering step for the region.
The DCash project absolutely places the Eastern Caribbean at the forefront of financial innovation. Its success, or its challenges, will offer invaluable insights for this global shift towards digital currencies. It could fundamentally reshape how commerce is conducted in the region and potentially offer a kind of blueprint for other economies, particularly small island states, to maybe follow.
Okay, one final point before we wrap things up. Regional airlines. They're facing renewed challenges, and this directly impacts connectivity, which is just so vital for island nations in the Caribbean.
Yes, reports indicate that rising global oil prices are once again creating significant operational headwinds for Caribbean airlines. Fuel is consistently one of the largest operating expenses for these carriers. And this sustained increase is putting immense pressure on the financial viability of many, particularly the smaller airlines that are so crucial for those inter-island connections.
What are the potential ripple effects, then, for travelers and really for the economic and social fabric of the region as a whole?
Well, this could directly translate into higher ticket prices for consumers, making inter-island travel more expensive, potentially less accessible. It might also lead to a reduction in flight frequency on less profitable routes, or maybe the introduction of new fuel surcharges, all impacting your pocket directly. For an archipelago that depends so heavily on air travel, for tourism, for business, for just keeping families connected, these impacts are deeply felt. The core insight here is that reliable air links are basically the circulatory system of the Caribbean.
So what does this all mean for the future of travel within the Caribbean? Are governments doing enough to support these vital air links? Or perhaps is it time to seriously invest in alternatives? Maybe more cost-effective forms of inter-island transport, like, say, modern, efficient ferry services.
The resilience of regional travel is certainly being tested right now. Creative, collaborative solutions between the airlines and governments are going to be necessary to ensure the Caribbean stays connected. While air travel is crucial, investing in diverse transportation options like robust, affordable, modern ferry services, that seems like a critical long-term strategy. It would build greater resilience against external shocks, like fluctuating oil prices, and help ensure that communities aren't isolated and economic growth isn't hindered.
Wow. What a deep dive into the pulse of the Caribbean. From weather patterns to economic shifts, historic labor laws to the future of digital currency, it's clear the region is incredibly dynamic, constantly evolving.
And all of this, you, or listener, can stay informed about, as these were all drawn from news items curated by the DGH News and Information Network.
And I'd like to remind you that you can listen to the news, weather, and lots more online at dghradio.com. You can also request to join our WhatsApp group, where you get the news, weather, and other insightful information delivered right to your smartphone. To join, just text JOIN DGH WhatsApp group to 1-315-898-43049. Make sure to include your name in the text message. You will receive a call back to verify your request.
That's right. And just so you know, weather updates can be heard at the bottom of each hour daily, 30 minutes after each hour. FSN News comes 15 minutes later on the 45-minute mark. Other news can be heard 4 times daily. From the USVI, that's 6 a.m., 12 p.m., 6 p.m., and 12 a.m. From the BEI, it's 7 a.m., 1 p.m., 7 p.m., and 1 a.m. News from the wider Caribbean is reported at 8 a.m., 2 p.m., 8 p.m., and 2 a.m. And U.S. and World News is at 9 a.m., 3 p.m., 9 p.m., and 3 a.m. We also have historical feature stories at 10 a.m., 4 p.m., 10 p.m., and 4 a.m. And Democracy Now! Plays at 11 a.m., 5 p.m., 11 p.m., and 5 a.m., except on weekends when we feature other insightful topics.
And between all those news reports, you'll hear originally produced Caribbean cultural and Afro-influenced music. Great stuff. Thank you for tuning in to the GH News and Information Network.